People no longer bound by NDAs. What surprising secrets can you expose? Story 1. In a tech support role, one manager used to boast his team's average call times were the lowest in the company. While average call times were in the 12 to 17-minute range, his team was constantly under 10 minutes. His team was awarded multiple times, and his strategy was adopted company-wide to all customer service and technical support teams, including our internal IT teams. That strategy was under a strict NDA, as we did not want to allow competitors to emulate it. When our call center would go bid on contracts, it became an awesome metric. Our customer satisfaction scores are on par, but we have call times 20 to 30% lower than our competitors. The dirty secret of the NDA that I was not allowed to disclose? Their big method? Just hang up on people. Straight up. Find a way to say, okay, go ahead and do that, and call back if it doesn't fix it. Then hang up. Don't wait for confirmation. Okay, so reboot your PC, and your problem should be solved. Thanks for calling, click. Eventually they came out with more useful metrics that track things like first call resolution, which absolutely shredded this company, and they went out of business a year or two later. Story 2. I worked for a website creation company back in 1999. It was during the early days of the internet boom, when businesses were scrambling to build an online presence. My job was managing websites for big brands, and one of my clients was a large bank sponsoring a contest for a round-trip paid ticket to the Super Bowl. It was a pretty big deal at the time. The Super Bowl was in South Florida that year, and the bank wanted to generate buzz by offering a prize package that included tickets, airfare, and hotel accommodations. My role was to build and maintain the website that collected all the contest entries. It was simple enough. Set up a form, capture the data, and make sure the entries were stored securely in the database. Nothing too fancy, but enough to keep me busy. One of my tasks was to post the official rules. The bank's legal department sent over this massive document that detailed every little aspect of the contest. It covered eligibility requirements, prize details, and most importantly, how the winner would be selected. It was supposed to be a random draw, no bias, no favoritism. Just a fair and square chance for everyone who entered. Since I also handled some of the back-end development, I wrote a software tool that could randomly select a winner from the database. It was basic but effective, an algorithm designed to make sure the process was completely fair. I even tested it several times to make sure it worked as intended. Everything was set and ready to go. But when the contest ended, things took a turn. I was called into a meeting with my manager and someone from the bank's marketing team. They told me to forget about the random selection tool I had built. Forget the rules we had posted online. Instead, they wanted me to open the database, scroll through the entries, and find someone who lived in South Florida. At first, I thought they were joking, but they weren't. The whole point was to avoid paying for airfare and accommodations. If the winner already lived near the stadium, the company could save a few $1,000s and still look like heroes for giving away a trip to the Super Bowl. Never mind that it completely undermined the fairness of the contest. I pushed back. I reminded them that the official rules explicitly stated the winner would be chosen at random. I pointed out that the tool I built ensured compliance with those rules. But they didn't care. The decision had already been made, and I was being told to fall in line. I spent the rest of the day staring at the database, feeling gross about the whole thing. Eventually, I found an entry from someone in Miami. I flagged it and sent it over to my manager. They congratulated me on a job well done, but I just felt sick. The winner was announced, and no one ever knew what had happened behind the scenes. The company got its PR moment, the bank got its positive press, and I was left questioning my career. I thought about blowing the whistle, contacting someone in the media, or reporting it to some kind of regulatory body. But this was 1999, and the internet wasn't what it is today. There weren't platforms like Twitter where you could instantly call out shady behavior. And honestly, I didn't think anyone would care. It was just a contest, right? No one got hurt. But the longer I sat with it, the more it ate at me. It wasn't about the contest. It was about integrity. People entered that contest believing they had a fair shot, and we lied to them. We manipulated the outcome to save a few bucks, and I had played a part in it. I ended up leaving that job a few months later. Not just because of the contest, but because it made me realize how common this kind of thing probably was. Companies cutting corners, bending rules, and doing whatever it took to protect the bottom line. It wasn't the kind of environment I wanted to be in. Story 3. At my old job, Pam helped me out in a way I'll never forget. It was December 2014, and I was scrambling to hit my yearly budget. If you've ever worked in sales, marketing, or pretty much any job with quotas, you know how brutal end-of-year goals can be. Every dollar counts, and missing the mark, even by a hair, can cost you more than just a bonus. I was cutting it close. Too close. The pressure was mounting, and I knew I needed something to push me over the line. That's when Pam stepped in. Pam worked in a different department, but we had always gotten along. She was sharp, experienced, and had a way of knowing what was going on behind the scenes without anyone actually telling her. Office politics never seemed to catch her off guard. I mentioned my situation to her one afternoon, not as a cry for help, but more as a venting session. I told her how I was short and how frustrating it was to be so close without quite making it. That's when she offered a solution. Pam suggested we reallocate my clients' ad scheduling. It was technically above board, but definitely walking a fine line. The idea was to shuffle some of their ad placements around, moving costs forward, so I could invoice a little extra for December. It wasn't adding fake numbers or cheating, just playing with the timing in a way that worked to my advantage. She knew the systems inside and out and walked me through the process step by step. By the end of it, I had enough to invoice out and hit my yearly budget. I went home that night feeling relieved, not realizing just how important Pam's help had been. 2 weeks later, I got let go. Story 4. Working in technical customer support for an IT/hardware company often meant navigating tricky situations, but nothing quite compared to the debacle involving a bad batch of chips supplied to us. These chips, unbeknownst to our customers, were ticking time bombs. They caused random watchdog resets, leading to spontaneous crashes and reboots of systems. The implications of this issue ranged from minor inconveniences to catastrophic outages, and as a frontline support representative, I had a front-row seat to the chaos. The chips were defective, plain and simple. Our company, recognizing the severity of the situation, pursued legal action against the supplier and ultimately secured a settlement to address the problem. For a brief moment, it seemed like we were on the path to doing the right thing, replacing the defective hardware and restoring customer confidence. But reality hit hard when the decision-makers, primarily MBAs and legal teams, deemed it too costly to recall and replace the units already in the field. Instead, they settled on a far cheaper and less honorable strategy: fix it in support. From that point on, our job in support shifted from helping customers resolve legitimate issues to running interference and damage control. We were provided with meticulously crafted talking points that framed the problem as isolated incidents rather than a systemic defect. It didn't matter that every member of the support team knew exactly what was going on. We had each handled multiple cases involving these faulty chips, sometimes for the same customers who had experienced repeated failures within weeks. Our scripts demanded that we feign ignorance. Each case had to be treated as though it were the first time we had encountered such a problem. Customers would call in, exasperated after multiple replacements and recurring failures, and we would have to pretend to be surprised. It was maddening, both for them and for us. We were expected to bury the issue under layers of process and procedures, turning what should have been a straightforward acknowledgement and replacement into a convoluted troubleshooting exercise designed to wear customers down. When support agents deviated from the script, they were swiftly counseled by management. Management framed this as a matter of maintaining professionalism, but we all understood the underlying message: stick to the script or face the consequences. Compliance was non-negotiable, even when it felt ethically dubious. We were effectively instructed to gaslight our customers, making them question whether their issues were as widespread as they seemed or merely isolated anomalies. The impact of this approach rippled far beyond frustrated customers and demoralized support staff. Several of our clients experienced high-profile outages directly attributable to the faulty chips. These outages didn't just cause inconvenience, they led to lost revenue, damaged reputations, and strained business relationships. Yet, we continued to downplay the problem, hiding behind carefully worded responses and procedural red tape. For support agents, the experience was demoralizing. Most of us took pride in helping customers solve problems, not in covering them up. We had entered this line of work to provide solutions, but we were forced to become part of the problem instead. Conversations with customers became battles of attrition, with us acting as gatekeepers rather than problem solvers. It was exhausting to pretend we didn't know the truth, especially when we did. Behind the scenes, The atmosphere among the support team was one of frustration and resignation. We vented to each other about the absurdity of the situation, sharing stories of customers who saw right through the charade, but couldn't get us to break from our script. Despite the pressure to comply, many of us quietly empathized with the customers, knowing full well how unfair the situation was. Attempts to escalate the issue internally were met with resistance. Management brushed off concerns, insisting that the cost-benefit analysis had already been done and the matter was settled. Even as the cases piled up and customer dissatisfaction grew, the official stance remained unchanged. Replacing the hardware in the field was too expensive, and the financial risk of admitting fault outweighed the reputational damage of continuing to cover it up, or so the higher-ups believed. The fallout from this decision lingered. Customers who suffered repeated failures began to lose faith in our products, leading to churn and damaged long-term relationships. Meanwhile, support staff morale continued to erode. Turnover increased as agents who couldn't stomach the dishonesty any longer left for other opportunities. Those who remained learned to compartmentalize their discomfort, treating the work as just another job rather than a mission to help others. Story 5. About 20 years ago, I signed an NDA with a very large record company that was dipping its toes into the murky waters of selling their catalog online. Streaming, downloads, digital sales, the works. This was the early 2000s, back when the concept of digital music was still in its Wild West days, and the industry was struggling to adapt. Napster had set the world ablaze just a few years earlier, and the powers that be in the music business were still reeling, unsure of how to combat this new wave of piracy while capitalizing on digital distribution. To say the whole venture was a minefield would be an understatement. At the time, the record company's bread and butter was still physical sales, CDs, vinyl, and the like. High street retailers were the gatekeepers to the charts, and pissing them off wasn't just bad business, it was suicidal. These were the same retailers that decided which albums got prominent shelf space, which ones were buried in the back, and ultimately, which ones made it onto the coveted charts. The company couldn't afford to alienate them while trying to navigate the digital frontier. The attempts to transition into online sales were a comedy of errors, mostly thanks to the upper echelons of the corporate hierarchy. These were folks who barely understood what an MP3 was, let alone how digital distribution worked. In a classic example of their out-of-touch decision-making, the entire top brass flew to Buenos Aires for a conference entitled, of all things, "What is an MP3?" Yes, that was the actual title. Now, this wasn't a tech boot camp or an intensive crash course on the nuances of digital media. No, it was more like a glorified retreat with a couple of PowerPoint presentations thrown in to justify the expense. And of course, they treated it as such. By all accounts, they spent more time partying than learning, soaking up the local nightlife instead of the lectures. When they finally returned stateside, they carried back little more than a hazy memory of the trip and a single, resounding takeaway from the conference. MP3s were scary. The one session that seemed to have left an impression was a fear-mongering talk about piracy. Apparently, it painted a vivid picture of teenagers worldwide sitting in their bedrooms, scraping MP3s from the web like digital pickpockets and distributing them freely like modern-day Robin Hoods. This was, of course, a massive oversimplification of the situation, but it played right into their paranoia. Armed with this newfound knowledge, the execs issued sweeping directives upon their return. Every piece of audio in the company's catalog, every song, every snippet, was to be scrubbed from the internet. Number 30-second previews, no promotional streams, no breadcrumbs that could lead pirates to their precious treasure trove. Not a single note of music was to remain accessible online. They didn't just want a digital lockdown, they wanted to throw the tapes in a chest, weld it shut, and sink it to the bottom of the ocean. In their minds, this would solve everything. If people couldn't hear the music online, surely they'd march right back to the stores and buy CDs again. Good old profitable CDs. The shiny discs that had kept the music industry fat and happy throughout the 90s. Never mind the fact that the genie was already out of the bottle. Napster had shown the world what digital music could be, cheap, instantaneous, and portable. The public wasn't going to unlearn that just because a few suits were clinging to their nostalgia for jewel cases and liner notes. The directive sent shockwaves through the company. Internally, we all knew it was a ridiculous move, but there was no arguing with the C-suite once they'd made up their minds. Teams scrambled to comply, yanking previews and demos off websites, shutting down streaming experiments, and effectively rolling back years of progress. It was like watching someone try to fight a flood by smashing their own plumbing. The irony was palpable. Here we were, a company supposedly at the forefront of the music industry, retreating into the digital equivalent of a bunker, while smaller, nimbler competitors were embracing the future. The indie labels were already experimenting with platforms like MySpace and emerging download services, building relationships with tech-savvy audiences who were eager to engage with music in new ways. Meanwhile, we were too busy cementing our catalog in stone, clinging to an outdated business model as though it were a life raft. What made it all the more tragic was the missed opportunity. The company had one of the richest catalogs in the world, decades of iconic music that could have been leveraged to dominate the digital space. Instead, they chose fear over innovation, paralysis over progress. In trying to protect the old ways, they alienated an entire generation of listeners who were discovering music through peer-to-peer sharing and emerging online platforms. By the time they finally woke up to the possibilities of digital sales and streaming, the likes of iTunes and Spotify had already eaten their lunch. Story 6. Manipulation of data to give false impressions of reliability was something I saw quite blatantly utilized with little repercussions. My company was struggling to meet on-time delivery schedules, and for numerous years was as embarrassingly low as 40%. A new manager comes in, and within months, we are now boasting an on-time delivery rate on a brilliant 95%. Turns out all he did was change what constituted an on-time delivery. Each time we knew a product would be late, we'd notify the customer of the delay and ask them to confirm they still wanted the order. If they still wanted the product, the on-time delivery would be recorded against the new expected date as opposed to the original promised date. Company literature was being sent out boasting of our 95% on-time delivery, now amongst the highest in the industry, when in fact we were by that point meeting less than 30% of initial delivery schedule targets. It was so simple that I'm sure numerous companies are getting away with such underhand tricks. Story 7. In July 2016, Lance Heint was appointed to a 5-year term as superintendent of the Katy Independent School District, ISD. It was a triumphant moment for Heint, one that saw him come back to his hometown to head one of the largest school districts in Texas. He began the job on October 1st, and by most accounts, his tenure was reasonably successful. He backed teacher pay raises and even drafted a $609 million bond package that won over voter approval. However, his career took a sharp turn on March 19, 2018. On that day, during an otherwise routine school board meeting, a former classmate of Heint, Gregory Gay, took to the podium and accused Heint of bullying him during their time junior high school together. Heint was seen chuckling at the allegations, which helped cause the video of the accusations to go viral and become national news, despite the allegations being nearly 40 years old. Heint, for his part, denied the allegations, but others came forward, including an Alabama judge, to accuse Heint of having a bullying past. There was even a lawsuit that accused Heint of beating a man unconscious when he was 18. The case was settled without criminal charges. But in the midst of the bullying allegations, a new set of accusations rose to the surface. Sean Dolan, himself a former Katy ISD student and parent of children in the district, noted on his blog, A Better Legacy, similarities between Heint's 2012 dissertation from the University of Houston and a 2008 dissertation by Keith Rowland at Liberty University. However, shortly after the allegations were launched, Heint announced his resignation from the position, which took effect on January 1, 2019. According to Heint, he and his family were the victims of an organized and relentless and dishonest smear campaign, and he needed to step away for his family's sake. But, while his resignation announcement was met with literal cheers, what happened after added a new layer of controversy to Heint's story. First, the school board set aside some $25,000 to be used in a potential defamation lawsuit filed on Heint's behalf. Second, they gave him a 2-year separation payment, estimated to be worth $750,000. This angered many, who wondered why taxpayer money was being used to provide him approximately 2 years' worth of salary and legal aid after he resigned. According to Dolan, the severance also resulted in a $350,000 penalty on the district issued by the state. However, after that resignation, things went quiet. The University of Houston continued its plagiarism investigation and, in January of this year, removed the dissertation from their site. The university has not commented publicly on the reason for the removal, nor whether any other action has been taken against Heint, but the policy of the university only allows for such removals to happen under special circumstances, including copyright violations, plagiarism, or falsification of data. For Dolan, who has not been sued so far, this was a vindication. While it likely brings the story to a close, it is an ending that leaves more questions than answers and more problems than solutions. The bizarre element. What makes the Lance Heint case so unusual is not the allegations against him. Neither the bullying allegations nor the plagiarism allegations are, by themselves, unusual. Many people in prominent positions face allegations of a checkered past, and even accusations of plagiarism in dissertations are remarkably common. What is unusual in this case is the response by both Heint and the KDISD. With both allegations, Heint and the KDISD never really took the allegations seriously. Though Heint did eventually apologize for his bullying past and admit to being a young man that did dumb things, that came out after details surrounding the lawsuit emerged. Looking back to the plagiarism element, Heint has always denied committing any plagiarism, even after Dolan and others pointed at significant portions of overlapping text. Even now, with the removal of his dissertation, he had not admitted to issues with his work and has stayed silent since the latest news. But what is even more bizarre is the support from the KDISD. The school board never wavered from their support for Heint and never seriously investigated any of the allegations against him. At least some teachers in the district were similar, even holding a rally for him after a school board meeting. Why this was the case is anyone's guess. Heint was largely responsible for a major bond referendum that brought in $609 million to the district and also helped increase teacher pay. However, even that doesn't explain the complete lack of curiosity about the allegations. Judging from the extensive news coverage, no one at KDISD investigated or even sought to significantly address the allegations. This may have ultimately harmed Heint, who could have benefited from an impartial and transparent investigation that showed both he and the KDISD were taking the issues seriously. However, it's also a missed opportunity in other ways. One of the major criticisms of Heint has been his handling of bullying at the KDISD. When revelations about his own past came out, he had an opportunity to talk openly about it, discuss what he had learned from it, why he changed, and how it was going to apply those lessons to his duties. Likewise, with the plagiarism allegations, there was an opportunity to show that the KDISD takes academic integrity seriously, investigate the claims independently, and show students that these issues are significant. They missed that opportunity as well. By rushing to his defense, the board and educators at the KDISD not only may have hastened his resignation by throwing gasoline on the firestorm around him, but they also missed some great opportunities to actually teach the students under their charge. Bottom line, to be clear, the major critics of Heint do have at least a degree of personal animosity against him. However, that doesn't mean that he's the victim of a smear campaign. To find that out, one has to look at the facts. The facts seem to indicate that he is, at the very least, problematic in these areas. The lawsuit against him and the removal of his dissertation don't necessarily prove that he was a horrible person or a rampant plagiarist, but they hint that there were issues in his past. These are issues that Heint and the KDISD ignored and denied. By not confronting these issues openly, directly, and transparently, Heint and the KDISD made things much worse. That's true not just for Heint, but for the students in the district. And that, in turn, is what is strange about this story, that what was best for the students was never really addressed. The board and at least some of the district's teachers rushed to protect Heint without really addressing the issues behind the controversies. In doing so, they missed some great opportunities to turn this controversy into something positive and only harmed everyone involved. Story 8. The lady who owns Columbia Sportswear neglects her animals to the point of death. And then she just buys more. I was supposed to be a caretaker for them, but there weren't even basic med supplies like bute and swat or vet wrap. She wouldn't call the vet for almost anything. 2 goats died of malnutrition, another its entire hoof fell off, 12 chickens died, 2 mini donkeys died, the guinea pig was kept alone in a hamster cage, and she kept her late husband's dog Monty locked in a dog run. Her dogs were permitted out, but not Monty, even on leash. Initially he was allowed out, and I got with him great shape taking walks every day. But one day she stopped allowing even that. I quit when she started talking about getting 30+ sheep and pigs. It was a miserable place, her mansion. I only worked there a year and brought in my own supplies to treat what I could, but it'll always break my heart I couldn't do more. I called animal control multiple times, and they never helped, even with the goats who looked like walking skeletons. Rich people can do whatever they want to living things. Story 9. Not under an NDA, but I am not allowed to say this to people. My employer is an HCM company, and the department I work in administers COBRA. For our friends not in the US, COBRA is a law that allows an employee to pay out of pocket to keep benefits they had while they were employed after a separation. This has been a thing since 1986. In many cases, your employer has to reinstate coverage with the carrier. There is no punishment if they do not. They have to inform you of your eligibility within 45 days or face fines with TAMRA, which is part of the IRS. We are not allowed to tell you that your former employer hasn't let the carrier know. We have to take the blame. There are some clients where I work where we do inform the carrier, but carriers like Blue Cross, Anthem, and Cigna are right now refusing to accept the reports we send them, and your coverage remains inactive. But the majority of the time, the client, employer, is responsible for reporting to the carrier of your COBRA election. There is no maximum time allotted for reinstatement. I've seen cases where the employer, client, has not reinstated benefits for 1 year, until the beneficiary tried to use the coverage and was denied, and they had been paying $2,500 a month just for their medical. This was not illegal, just irresponsible. Reinstatements are the number one issue I deal with, and it's daily. I have tried to get my employer to make an effort to ensure the client reinstated in a timely manner, and they refuse, saying they do not want to anger the client. I've also written letters to President Biden and VP Harris explaining this situation and to present policy. An expansion of TAMRA to include reinstatement deadlines would do wonders. Story 10. Former agent for a driving app here. I used to handle the driver's part of the app, and that part was rather messed up, because I would often get drivers asking why their accounts were taken down. I stopped being surprised after realizing that for every 3 drivers that reached out or so, 2 among them were shut down, either for fraudulent activity or for, mostly sexual misconduct. Frauds include starting and stopping without the rider, messing with the GPS to charge the rider with surcharges, especially on airports, or attempting to upload bogus or edited documents. About this one, it was disgustingly easy to bypass the docs filter because there were plenty of countries where the app worked that didn't run background checks. On top of that, privacy policies wouldn't let us disclose the cause of the deactivation either, thus resulting in drivers often trying to sneak back into action with a duplicate account, only for me to laugh in their faces when finding out they were stonewalled because of their original account. On the other hand, there were a handful of drivers who presumably didn't do a thing wrong, but then again, policies would leave our hands tied, and we had to give out the bad news anyway, if you know what I mean. I'll maybe edit this comment if I can remember more. It's been about 5 years since I stopped working there. I just remembered another one. Incidents involving sexual assaults, murder, altercations, and the like were handled by another team elsewhere, and we had strict orders never to disclose such incidents with whoever asks about the matter. Since this type of incidents would compromise the company's reputation, we barely had any new updates about them, or no updates at all, instead finding out through news circulating about. This is how I found out about most of the incidents, a fraction involving females being sexually assaulted or murdered in the worst of cases, another fraction involving app drivers being involved in altercations with local taxi cab drivers demanding to GTFO and resorting to attack the driver if their demands aren't fulfilled. The last fraction of incidents involves drivers being mugged or killed by organized crime. This is also relevant as drivers are often unprotected when in such scenario. Story 11. I worked for BuzzFeed, and they told us to post on our /Askreddit and then steal content for our articles, and my BuzzFeed NDA says I'm not allowed to tell you all that. Story 12. IT consultant of many, many winters. The most critical applications in banking, insurance, and finance run on badly outdated machines held together by duct tape, prayers, and compress end dust, standing in dark, wet corners in mostly forgotten basements. Also, those systems are written in the most obscure and long-dead programming languages, or even directly in assembler for a certain chipset, written by code wizards in their own idiosyncratic dialects, who are now long retired or even dead. Backup systems are mostly non-existent, or the data tapes are worn down to basically transparent tape. Even had a case around 2020, where a cleaning tape from '99 was still in the bay, due to the robot being faulty. If a cleaner or janitor pulls the wrong plug to find an outlet for their vacuum, there is a decent chance that whole branches or even institutions begins to crumble. Most of those systems will also never be updated due to their legacy status, aka we don't know what this is doing or even how it is doing, what it is doing, but it is a critical part of our whole infrastructure and nobody dares to touch it. But we will never invest the necessary sums to analyze those systems, write documentation, or even replace them. NDAs for companies I did projects for are long gone, but some of them are currently in an investigation process for fraud and tax evasion, so I won't disclose exact informations. Story 13. There's a government in East Asia that was or still is running a low-key sterilization campaign in Central and Eastern Africa. They do it in partnership with a private company I used to work for. I was sworn in on the project in September 2013. I was with the company until late 2017 and had to sign an NDA that I wouldn't say anything. The NDA didn't specifically mention sterilization, but instead the methods used. The company I worked for with funding from this particular East Asian government set up free clinics in half a dozen or so African nations and offered free healthcare to the locals. Naturally, they went for it because they were getting much better quality of healthcare than they had ever gotten before. They were baited with the quality treatment and then sterilized without their knowledge. The methods used were non-surgical, and the company I worked for was given a quota of 30,000 to 50,000 sterilizations a year by the government funding the project. I don't know if they're still running the program, the company is still in business, but I don't know if they've still got the contract or if some competitor offered a better deal to that particular East Asian government. This is as far as I'm willing to go on the details. Story 14. Not I only had to sign an NDA-style contract regarding the specific place I was at, but I spent about a year doing on-site security for an Amazon data center. There are 5 things that people don't know/realize about such places. You won't ever find them on Google Maps or any similar app. They're such important infrastructure that not even a company's competitors want to risk anything happening to them. They eat a lot of pizza, enough pizza that I had to be briefed several times how the local pizza delivery service was a security threat because of how much pizza the techs and workers ate. Someone had to know something important was here. These sites guzzle power, to the point that they have their own city-sized transformer stations dedicated to them. Any problems here, and the center either shuts down, or there's an attempt to run the whole place off of semi-truck-sized generators. Each stack of servers makes about $100,000 of revenue for Amazon every minute. Each building has at least 100 of these server stacks. And finally, every single ounce of power, info, data, etc. all runs through a bundle of fiber optic wires that are easily accessible because they require an absolute maddening amount of maintenance. They are also hard to replace, as replacement length has to be ordered weeks in advance. Which is all a long way to explain that data centers are much easier to find than you think, while also being surprisingly fragile pieces of infrastructure. Even the slightest downtick in energy to the building can cost the company millions of dollars every minute. While a whole server stack going down can take weeks to replace, if it can't be fixed quickly, can erase a large portion of the bottom line. All while the place is run as efficiently as possible by heavily underpaid techs, mechanics, software engineers, and security personnel. Have fun with that knowledge. Story 15. A very popular website you would know with a public good guy persona for platforming creative people and supporting innovation is actually secretly a pit of vipers who take advantage of those same creatives. Behind the scenes, they have a well-worn strategy for taking advantage of startups in the space. They approach these small startups with promises of partnership, dangle a lucrative letter of intent, a job, and then start working with you on how to start integrating your innovations into their platform. Then the manipulation starts. They slowly start adding friction into the process, so you feel pressure to find creative solutions to making your technology work with their bad system. You think you're helping them, but what you're really doing is helping them supplant you. Meanwhile, you're burning so much time and energy working on jumping through pointless hoops that your growth stalls out and your runway shortens because they technically haven't acquired you yet, but you're still required to pay yourself with your revenue during the LOI period. After gaining just enough access to the startup's technology and background, and after you've helped them work through a lot of the sticky bits, eventually pull back their offer, cut ties, and poof, they develop the tech themselves and launch it soon after the rug is pulled from under you. The company's aggressive legal team ensures this tactic stays under the radar because the NDA they make you sign during the LOI process is so blanket you don't realize it covers this exact sleazy behavior. But the damage is already done. They are the big gorilla in the space, so even when they implement a worse version of your tech, it basically squeezes you out. If you push back with your own lawyers, they throw you a little hush money in exchange for signing an even more draconian NDA, and then you're hosed, but you don't have really any other option if you want any money after months of work. They've done this to multiple startups. I honestly spent months in a deep depression thinking it was something I did, and how I wasted years of my life on it, and let it slip through my fingers. An acquaintance in the industry called me because she hadn't seen me at the last few gatherings. I completely fell apart on the phone. I shared some vague bits of what went down, and she connected me with someone else who literally had the exact same thing happen to them. We swapped notes, then I found a couple others it happened to. I went from depression to being livid. I'm still tangentially involved in the industry, though another avenue, and now, when I see other innovations pop up from other startups, I now explicitly seek the new innovators out at conventions or at professional gatherings. Because I didn't take the hush money, I don't have to worry about the liability like some of the other folks do. While I can't talk in specifics, I can still speak pretty pointedly about what things to look out for from big companies that may wish to acquire you. Here's how they will take advantage of you. Here's how they screw you, etc. I can't ever get retribution for what they did to me, but I can at least prevent them from doing it to others. If I can give any advice from this nightmare, trust in agreements, not in people. It doesn't matter how good you think they are as people, or how good the mission is you think you are supporting. The people in a company can change at any time. If it's not in that document, it is worthless. And anyone who says they care about you in the process but won't put it in writing is lying.